Yeah, just come along. It's well thought out. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but it is it's going to be a very touching moment. Now I know I was talking. We do have some first responders who served and then came back home and were first responders. So we are going to do a first responders gathering on the day after Ponta Delgada, and so that'll be in the Cruz Compass as well. So if you see any, or if you've talked to any first responders, please let them know that that will be in the Cruz Compass as well. Let's go ahead, and Pete, if we can go ahead and just turn this up a little bit. We want to find out the new people and what branch of military they served for, when they served, and whereabouts you're from. So if you're new to us here, we want to know a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Jim Harris. I served in the Air Force from '66 to '88, originally from Medford, Massachusetts.
Whatever else you want to tell me.
I enjoyed my time in the service. I'd do it all again. Thanks.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Ken Dunn. I spent 22 years on active duty with the Army Corps of Engineers. I did tours in Vietnam, 2 tours in Korea, to include a tour up in the demilitarized zone. My last position was really pretty interesting. I was the military assistant to the Assistant Secretary of the Army, so I really got to see how things work in Washington.
Hi, my name's Robert Paff. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I served in the Army for 2 years at Fort Sill, artillery. Was a front of the artillery. I was only in for 2 years.
2 years.
Danny Ringheiser, Air Force from 73 to 93. Overseas, I was stationed in Turkey and the Philippines. Went to Turkey right after the Cyprus invasion. Went to the Philippines when Marcos was president. They ousted him. So I got to go through that. And I still don't know how the 2 piano men got that piano in their suitcase.
Somebody else is new over here. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Dennis Lynch, Water. I was in the Navy from 65 to 70. 65, we did shakedown boats with PBRs at the Cameron Bay, and then I was on carriers for 2 years. And Armed Forces Police, and did a lot of stuff.
Thank you. Yes.
My name's Art Turner, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USMC, stood main gate, Pearl Harbor, in West Lockwood, Kelly, from 75 to 77.
Somebody else new to us here? Yes, sir.
Jerry Boldock. I was in the Army from 68 to 98. I was an air defense artillery officer.
Thank you. Somebody back here new or? Yes, sir.
My name is Robert Inge. I was with the 82nd Airborne, 3rd Infantry Division, 37th Armor. I was served from 58 to 64 in Germany, Berlin.
Coming around.
Hi, my name is Charles Watt. My wife and I, Jane here, are from Austin, Texas, a little town outside Austin called Georgetown, originally from El Paso. But I served in the Army in the Presidio of San Francisco, so suffer. I was a criminal investigator for the Army at the Presidio in 1967 through 70.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Yes, somebody over here. Yes. Oh, been here a few weeks.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Reddick. I served in the Air Force on B-52s from 1980 through 2003. I currently work for the Army now, so I've been in with the Department of Defense for 38 years.
My name is Richard Long. I served in the Army from 58 to 61. I was at the time of the Berlin crisis with the 3rd Division.
Alan Belmano served in the Army, enlisted in '73, retired in 2000, Did 20 years on active duty and a few years in the reserves. I went from private to major.
Larry Robbins, currently from Dayton, Ohio. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was my last duty station. I served 36 years in the Air Force and 46 different countries.
Oh, wow.
Turkey. I would retire there in a heartbeat until this Erdogan guy took over. Turkey was a wonderful place. My wife went with me every step of the way, and when I retired, I asked her, I said, okay, you've lived from ocean to ocean, most of Europe, where do you want to go? She said, here. You're not moving me again. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio. Does anybody have any stories they want to share? Any interesting, I don't know, any interesting stories?
I met my wife in the Army.
Did you meet your wife in the Army? Anybody else meet their wives in the Army? I know we had a few people the other day.
RCL.
Sorry, somebody had a story over here. Yes, sir.
I got to Vietnam in October. My daughter was born in December, so I was on a combat mission at night, and they relayed the information to me, and it got passed on to Stars and Stripes, and they picked up the story, and so my daughter's birth announcement was worldwide.
Yes, sir. Can I pass that back? Thank you.
I mentioned I was in the Philippines. Well, when I went on vacation to Hawaii, Marcus was already in base housing in Hawaii. So a person from PACAF that I dealt with said, I'm going to take you a tour around the base. So he took me around the base, went up to this barricade, and there was some couple guys standing there. Marcus was staying in base housing there behind him. So we turned around, started driving around the base. Well, those guys jumped in their car and started following us. I said, uh-oh, what did we do? So when we stopped, I said, well, can we help you? He says, oh, we thought you were here to count the money. But no, I said, I'd be glad to, one for him, two for me, but they wouldn't go with that.
When I was in Cameron Bay, we were doing, checking out PBRs and stuff. We had to take a couple Marine recons up a river, maybe 20 miles. We came under fire for about 10 seconds. And the one Marine, decorated veteran like crazy, standing there, shaking his head. I says, how come you're not returning fire? And he says, they told me these things were bulletproof.
I was stationed at Fort Meade in the MPs. I was one of the NCOs that was assigned to work with U.S. Marshals to guard John Hinckley when he tried to assassinate President Reagan. And we had a lot of different stories. This guy, I could tell, keep you all day, but one of them that was particularly funny involved in paparazzi is we would have to take him to see psychiatric appointments in D.C. to determine whether he was insane or not for trial. And of course, outside the gate of the jail was paparazzi like you couldn't believe. Every news channel station, everybody's camped out every day trying to get a glimpse of him. So we came up with the idea one day just to, people believe what they think they're seeing. So we came up with the idea to get somebody that's about his size, put a bulletproof vest on him, put a hat on him, walk him right out, put him in a car, drive away. We did that, and it was the funniest thing you ever saw. It wasn't him, of course. It was a decoy in one of my Spec 4s, and they were fumbling, dropping cameras, running all over the place, trying to get in their cars, trying to follow this car that they thought was him. And we waited 5 minutes. There was nobody there. We just walked out, got in the car, and left.
Yes, sir. Come on over your way.
I was a judge advocate in the Air Force, and the being in Ireland recently, it reminded me of the first time my wife and I were in Ireland. I was Chief of Military Justice for the Air Force at the time, and therefore would liaison with the American Bar Association Criminal Justice section when they met. And they had a meeting in Dublin. So Colonel Fran Gilligan from the Army, my counterpart, he and his wife, I and my wife, we had to go to Dublin to go to the meeting. And we had to get permission from the Irish government because they're not a member of NATO. So they had to send notice to the American Embassy. And that was Margaret Heckler, under the Reagan administration, was the American ambassador at the time. As a result, my wife and I, and Fran Gilligan from the Army and his wife, were invited to have dinner with the American ambassador at her residence. And we dined with the Lord Chief Justice of Ireland and the Attorney General. And we also were invited over to the Lord Mayor's house and had cocktails there.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Hello, sir.
Yeah, I was on another cruise line. Anyway, smaller ship, and there was only about 8 of us in the vets get together. And the Navy guys might enjoy this, but there was a commander of a submarine on there. Said his chief came to him and woke him up one night and says, "We've got an emergency." So the commander says, "What's the emergency?" He said, "We're running out of toilet paper." So he got up, they inventoried the toilet paper, and they issued each member of the submarine 2 rolls of toilet paper to finish their tour. He says, then from then on, you see everybody walking around with a bulge under their shirts with 2 rolls of toilet paper under there.
It's funny you mentioned toilet paper. It was a few cruises ago where we were running low. The inventory didn't come in as we were expected. So we had to cancel the Mexican buffet. All right, I'm joking about the buffet. I'm telling the truth about the toilet paper. But no, true story, because when you're over here, we place our orders. However, they don't come for 6, 7, 8 weeks because we're over here, and most of them come from stateside. So we have to sometimes go out and, I know we were out of grapefruit juice there, so they went out in Cork and picked up a bunch of grapefruit juice to last us all the way through the crossing. So, somebody's happy about that, yeah. So that's the thing when we're working over here, that sometimes you just don't get stuff. But the toilet paper thing was true, just not buffet. I was just being silly. Yes, sir.
I was a supply corps officer on a destroyer. As a supply corps officer on a destroyer, you have a whole lot of things you have to do. But one of them is to make sure that the crew is paid. We pulled into Malaysia, and I had to go and get approximately $250,000 out of the bank in Malaysia. And I usually wore a pistol. So I strapped on the pistol and hailed a taxi cab. I had a dispersing clerk with me, and we proceeded to drive the 20 or 30 miles from a port that our destroyer was located, and hopped out of the taxi at the port, hopped out of the taxi at the bank, went on in with my gun strapped to my side. I noticed that there were some people that were somewhat confused about this guy walking. He's in white, wearing a gun on his side. And I got the $250,000, counted it out, it was right, put it in my black satchel, and hopped back in the same taxi cab that was waiting, and went on back to the ship. When I got back to the ship, the captain wanted to see me. He said that there had been a complaint filed with the government of a guy that was carrying a gun in the country. He smiled when I told him that I had enough money to pay the crew. I didn't know any other way to do it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
When I left Vietnam, my next assignment was Korea, and I reported to my battalion commander in January in jungle fatigues and didn't even have a field jacket.
Any other good ones? Yes, sir. Come on over to you.
I'm Jim Daniel, retired E.H. Storkey. One of my last duty stations was aboard a patrol gunboat. These patrol gunboats had been used up and down the rivers in Vietnam. And after that was over with, they didn't know what to do with these ships and these old boats. So I was in Little Creek, Virginia, and we were assigned as the red team. They didn't know what to do with us, so we were the bad guys. So we were on our way down to Vieques, where the amphibious operations were being held. And we left early and got down off Puerto Rico. The main body of the fleet was coming through, and we knew when and where they would be there. So we rigged ourselves up that night as a fishing boat. We had our lights rigged out and sat there. And the fleet came and was we were right in the middle of them. And we decided that we would light them up. So we had our 3-inch 50 and our 50 milligram, those big guns. And we just, the tracers were flying everywhere. And the fleet just went into general quarters. And it was a rousing time. It was nice to be the bad guy. Nope, I never shot back.
Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Garland, and I mentioned the other day I was a pilot in the RAAF, but I did serve with the USAF a couple of times, including flying F-111s. But I've got a couple of little stories. One was in the late 50s. Our Air Force had a squadron of vampires in Malta, and they used to take their leave over in the UK. And anyway, this Les Reading, he stuck up a liaison with this high society girl over there, and they decided to get married. 2 transport aeroplanes came over, one of which had the Archbishop of Canterbury to marry them, so the guests all over the place. And it was a Friday, and that night he looked around and he decided, this is not for me. So he went to the CO and said, can I get one of the vampires and I'm out of here. So everywhere he went, he was told, no more Maltas on this place. But I later served with him in Malaya, and he's a real character. He was CO of 77 Squadron, and I was in 3 Squadron. And there's a rule up there that you weren't allowed to have shorts in the mess after 7 o'clock at night. So anyway, it was about 7:20, and we're all, a Friday night, we're all standing around having beers, and the CO base squadron came in, and he looked around, and he went up to Les, being the senior officer there, all in shorts, and he said, come on, you're supposed to set an example. So all he did was nod, and everybody took their shorts off.
Coming back here. Sir.
My sea story is about when I returned from Korea in '51. My orders were to report to the Marine Barracks, U.S. Naval Submarine Base, New London, Connecticut. Now, why the Navy does it, I don't know, but it's not in New London, it's in Groton, Connecticut. Why I, a Marine, was going to a submarine base was beyond me. And where was Connecticut? So I had to look it up on the atlas, find Connecticut. And then saw too many World War II movies about U-boats going into caves. There's no caves there, they come up the Thames River. And there were only 45 Marines, and we had to take care of 2,000 sailors. Now, I have a question for you. Are you still looking for them, and have you found one?
If you're at the cocktail party, still looking for one. Juan. Yes, sir. You got one?
I'm John Fraley. I did 30 years in the Navy from 1970 to 2000. I was a physician, ran ICUs, and at one point in my career in the 1980s, I was at Naval Hospital Charleston, South Carolina. And because I ran respiratory therapy at the hospital, the Air Force Reserve Squadron that did medevac missions out of Charleston Air Force Base used my respiratory therapy techs to fly missions because they didn't have any respiratory therapists in their squadron, and they would carry patients on ventilators to BAMC, to the burn center. And so I flew with the Air Force. They got me my own flight suit. I was a Navy commander and an honorary Air Force lieutenant colonel at the same time. And there was one training mission we went on that we were in the C-141 in the back, and we didn't have, because it was a medevac, we had airplane passenger seats for the staff, and then the ventilators were in the back, and I did lectures and this and that for the nurses and the air crew. But we flew from Charleston Air Base out to the West Coast and down the West Coast, and then came in to Texas, to Fort Worth. We landed the airplane, and this is in the middle of the Cold War. So where we landed, we walked down the ladder, and I was looking at the nose of a locked and loaded B-52 that had nuclear weapons on it, and a guy with a full automatic M16 looked at me and he said, "Doc, you can't walk this way, you gotta walk that way." And it was kind of funny, but the Air Force, I love those people so much. When we got to where we were gonna go, they put us in two buses. One went to Billeting to find our housing. The other bus went to the package store and loaded the bus full of beer, and then they met us where our hotel was. So I had a wonderful weekend celebrating with the Air Force.
He reminded you of something, all right.
Well, I had come up through enlisted ranks. I was a lieutenant, got in as a commander at a small site in a place called Şahin Tepesi, Turkey, and we had a support base 56 miles away. And I had a tendency to use kind of enlisted solutions to a lot of problems. One of the solutions was I had a bus, and I'd send the people down to Carousel where there's a barber, buy a case of beer, you guys have fun, do whatever you want and everything, but I don't want to hear any complaints about haircuts, or it's, you know, you're not going to have this privilege. In the meantime, the guys are getting new guys in and so forth, and they were having a kick with mooning. Yeah, and always you get a new guy and you get him kind of gassed up at the bar. And I just tell him, hey, look, you ever seen the Turkish sunrise? And over that window they have a spotlight on it. Over there some guy dropped his drawers. You know, that was a lot of fun. But anyway, one time my boss, this colonel, came up to the site. And it was on one of these days when I had sent the bus and the beer and the guys down to get haircuts. And Colonel got done, and he said, I rode with him. He was a function I was going to. So we were heading on the way down, and he was looking, hey, isn't that your bus head coming your way? I says, well, yeah, it could be, Colonel. I said, oh. And so, Colonel, I really need to talk to you about something. I got this D6 bulldozer up here, and I really need a D8, blah, blah, blah. I got his attention. And he was looking at me as we went by our bus, and I caught him out of the corner of my eye. Every window on my side had a Turkish sunrise in it. Anyway, I got away with that.
Very good. I have to remember that Turkish sunrise. Anybody else have a fun story? Sure. Yes. All I gotta do is make eyes with somebody. Hold on one second.
Remember that, guys. He's the little guy, bald.
Anyway, over in Turkey, keep in mind, everybody in the Middle East hates the Kurds.
One of the luckiest people in the world. We both got assigned in country at the same time. He got assigned to something called MACV, Military Assistance Command. He worked with the Vietnamese, which meant that he spent a lot of time around Ben Hoa Air Force Base. And for those of you who don't know, every once in a while we would get USO folks in country, usually young ladies that would come out to fire bases with a contingent. They always brought donuts with them, so they were known as donut dollies. Well, one of the things that is almost statistically impossible to do in Vietnam is to get a date. He happened to be in the right place at the right time. A young lady who had been in country for a while took a brand new young lady under her arm, and she agreed to double date my best friend and his buddy, and they went to the club at Ben Hoa. In the middle of lunch, the young lady from the United States who hadn't been in country more than a week said she had to go powder her nose. And they said, well, understand you've got to go out behind the club, that's where the latrines are. So she decided she could do that on her own. One of the animals in Vietnam that has a cousin in Africa called a Cape buffalo is a water buffalo. And a water buffalo and a Cape buffalo are indistinguishable at close range, 800 to 1,000 pounds. Cape buffalo is one of the nastiest creatures in the world with its attitude. The water buffalo, on the other hand, is an extremely docile animal. 10 minutes went by, the young lady didn't come back. 15 minutes later, they decide to get up and go look for her. They walk around the building, and there she is standing, frozen, stock still, and she's wet herself from the waist all the way down to her shoes. 5 feet away from her is a water buffalo. And she's looking at the water buffalo, and he's looking at her. She's not moving a hair. I guess what really added salt to the wounds was, aside from everybody that she was with laughing at her, a young Vietnamese boy, about 4 years old, walks up with his stick, smacks the water buffalo on the nose, grabs it by the ring, and walks off. Talk about getting to know where you are.
Some good stories. I'm enjoying them. I love hearing stories. Anybody else like to share anything? Again, if you were here at the first one, I mentioned the first gathering we had, the food and beverage team decided to again supply us with some nice tea and coffee and cookies, and we have champagne up there as well, so if you'd like to take a glass with you on the way out, although I know that you were kind of pointing at yourself and you two may have been in the same area at the same time, as I understand that, so maybe if you guys would want to chit-chat with each other. But as a reminder, just again, on September 11th, we're going to do a ceremony in the Centrum area of the ship, so we invite each and every one of you to that. That would be great. So thank you for coming, and we open it up if you want to mingle with each other. Thank you.